Few names are as controversial and polarizing as Imagine Dragons. It feels like you are either on one side of the battlefield or another, a fucking desert filled with active landmines anytime you want to go and try to discuss Imagine Dragons, because people are on one side of the extreme or the other usually, or you got the cool people who are just neutral in the middle and could not give any less of a shit about them. I wanted to go a little bit in depth about my issues with Imagine Dragons and why I feel the way that I do, in a constructive manner, to sort of put a perspective out there for people that enjoy them and for the people that don't, and also get your input on why you think Imagine Dragons are so hated, how we got to that point, and do you think that they deserve the sort of ire that they get. I made a video recently about the bands that don't deserve the hate. I personally think that a lot of the critiques are pretty valid, and the polarization with Imagine Dragons is pretty justifiable. With that being said, I don't condone like wishing death threats or going after the artists themselves or saying that they're shitty human beings. I'm going into this not knowing that much about them as people, so I cannot comment on that, but to my knowledge, there haven't really been any major hiccups or controversies with Imagine Dragons, so they at least got that going for them. I see a critique brought up a lot when it comes to Imagine Dragons, and it kind of gets defended by the people that like them, of they aren't real rock music and they shouldn't be one of the faces of modern rock. And a lot of times the fans will kind of come around and say, well, you just don't like evolution, you don't like growth in your music, you don't like bands that are pushing the envelope. And my thing is fuck no, I disagree with that. I don't think a lot of times Imagine Dragons, at least nowadays, fit the criteria for rock in the way that people portray them to be. They don't really embody any of the energy, a lot of their instrumentation doesn't fit, and the vast majority of their music boils down to more electronic influences, more pop influences, hip-hop influences, and while that isn't a bad thing if you counterbalance that with the rock influences, it feels more scant, bare bones, and few and far between comparatively speaking. There was a time when Imagine Dragons had more rock semblances, but that did diminish over time as they started to placate to their formula, their pattern, and clearly know and play towards a fan base, the big arena stadiums, and being in the new fucking Toyota commercial. I don't buy that Imagine Dragons is simply changing the formula. I just personally think that they are looked at in a way they shouldn't be. Because throughout the decades, there have been plenty of rock and rock-adjacent bands that have been willing to blur the lines between mainstream popularity, pop influences, other influences, and still be rock bands, still be kick-ass, still be timeless, still make classics. Coldplay has made some great fucking records. Look at U2, look at how Paramore changed their style over time. Look at all of the old school bands like the Beatles, who were very folksy, blues-inspired, pop-inspired, but were still devoutly rock and roll people. Radiohead took so many influences and put it into a rock formula, which is a very good comparison, because Imagine Dragons and Radiohead both employ a lot of synths and a lot of electronics into their music. Tom York has always been interested in, like Atoms for Peace, like the side project, in incorporating different electronics and synths. You look at older bands like Fleetwood Mac that were able to blur the lines with blues and folk and pop rock, and it still be some of the most timeless music ever. You look in the 2000s and you see projects like Linkin Park in their later years take different influences but still be a rock band, even if they changed from being metal or not. It's not even getting into the pop punk bands that were very pop centric, had a lot of radio crossover appeal. So no, I am not going to sit and buy that Imagine Dragons is a rock band through and through in the same way that any of the bands I just listed are. There's a big difference between towing the line and doing something interesting and still having that crossover appeal, and quite literally just stepping out of the confinements of that entirely and still being put as this figurehead, put on this pedestal, considered the future of rock and roll music. And I know that a bunch of fucking boomers, no offense, have always said guitar music is dead, rock and roll is dead. I don't think rock and roll has ever been dead, but there is such a way to go about it that you can bear the torch. And I don't even know if Imagine Dragons considers themselves rock at this point. And trust me, I have been privy to the evolution of Imagine Dragons. I was in my formative years when Imagine Dragons burst on the scene with tracks like Radioactive progressive, and I saw every subsequent album that released thereafter, and progressively, all you saw was this thorough line where you got these over-compressed, over-equalized, loudness war baiting songs that would just be full to the brim of synths and electronics, very rarely putting in instrumentation, and I'm sure that this would be different for a live performance because they are going to have their band playing live instrumentation, and by no means am I saying that they don't have rock semblances, but I think that it is their status that annoys me and frustrates me more than anything else, because some people's first introductions to rock music is going to be Imagine Dragons, and while you always need a good gateway, there are dozens upon dozens, hundreds of other rock and rock adjacent projects that I think do something more tasteful with their crossover appeal, with their different influences, and it feels like Imagine Dragons have become so homogenous, so annoying, so irritating in the way that they write music, in the way that they write choruses. Dan Reynolds' strained, just hoarse-sounding vocals getting weirder and weirder throughout their time. It feels disingenuous, it feels phoned in, and it just feels fake. It feels desaturated, and it feels like nothing could come from Imagine Dragons if it didn't go through a fucking meeting with 50 different directors and producers trying to guide it to have the most mainstream appeal that it possibly can. It is hard to listen to a song like Enemy or Thunder or Believer and feel like it didn't come out of a fucking factory. It feels like ChatGPT's success story of how to make a popular pop rock song that will be on the radio and be in big movies and stadiums and shit. While that is fine, and I have absolutely no issue with if you love Imagine Dragons, if you get something from Imagine Dragons, if they saved your life, if you adore them, if they're your favorite band, that is fine. More power to you. I would never take that away from you. I just don't think that the way that Imagine Dragons are seen and the way that they're constantly put in playlists as like, this is what modern rock is, when there are so many other bands, some struggling, some popular, that are doing interesting and fun things, that's what I like to see. And while I'm a big fan of like dumb fun music, I think that you always need that background music. I think that there are not only better options, but I don't think that Imagine Dragons should be the figurehead of modern rock music as often as they are, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like them. And the thing that I personally have noticed is I don't notice a lot of sycophants with Imagine Dragons, and I think that says something. I think it speaks volumes, because there seems like a statistical anomaly with how many people listen to Imagine Dragons, like the sheer number, the volume of their numbers on Spotify and YouTube and all these different platforms, and it feels disproportionate to how many people feel like they are ride or dies for Imagine Dragons. It feels like people just turn it on as mindless background music, or it's just playing on a playlist, and so those numbers get inflated in some form or fashion. It feels like there's not that much excitement, and for this video I literally went to some comment sections of Imagine Dragons videos, looked at the top comments, and it just seems like vapid. It seems like it's not really fully there, that the excitement and the intrigue is not to the same degree of so many other bands that are at Imagine Dragons levels or have been to the level in the past. And I think that kind of does sort of tell a story of where Imagine Dragons sits in the pantheon, where they're not necessarily beloved per se, but it's their numbers that gets them held to the standard and pushed by the industry to sort of be the face of rock, because success stories are always going to attract more people to want to clamor for you and want you in the musical space because it makes them fucking money. But those are my opinions of Imagine Dragons. Do you like them? Do you not? And what are your reasons? There is no wrong answer. Don't worry about it. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.